I've been very vocal about the way I feel. I'm not afraid to admit the way I
The
feel.
level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they are adding to a set of challenges that this business is already facing.
And we didn't see eye to eye on that. And sadly, I still love the character. I still love to do it, but I had to defend myself.
The alarm didn't start with a deadline or a blown-up tweet. It started with a sigh on mic, on camera, in front of millions. "I've said how I feel," the Guardian muttered, and the room went cold. Translation: the mask is off. The studio that cashed in on a ragtag family of misfits just got called out by one of its own, and the fallout is exactly the nightmare Disney hoped to avoid. Because here's the part they didn't plan for. The Guardians aren't supposed to rebel. They're supposed to smile, hit their marks, shake hands, and sell the magic. Instead, you got a former wrestler with nothing to prove and a spine of rebar saying the quiet part out loud. Not a tantrum. A line in the sand. He didn't just question a contract. He questioned the culture. Rewind the tape. 2018. Old tweets surface. James Gunn is fired. Overnight, like a light switch. The internet detonates. The cast signs a letter measured, professional. Dave Bautista. Not measured. Not interested. He goes, studio speed blunt. Nauseating, unfair. Bring James back or kill off Drax. In an industry built on agreeable silence, that wasn't a quote, that was a warning flare. People called it reckless. He called it loyalty. And tucked inside that loyalty was the truth. The boardroom couldn't spin. Guardians wasn't a product line. It was a miracle pulled from the oddest corners of Marvel's IP and willed into a phenomenon by a director the cast trusted with their careers. Remove the glue and the mosaic shatters, then a second fault line opened. As Marvel widened its conveyor belt and streaming swallowed every free hour on the calendar, whispers turned to grumbles, turned to receipts. While the franchise soared, while merch racks overflowed and box office totals became press release trophies, the folks wearing the makeup, swinging the foam weapons, and staying up for reshoots heard a new corporate mantra: do more with less, fewer bonuses, tighter schedules, efficiency, the kind of word you hide behind when you don't want to say cut. Cue the CEO on cable news saying the asks from labor were not realistic. Polite phrasing, brutal subtext. Be grateful. Take the deal. Smile for the poster. That's when the temperature shifted from frustration to fury. Because if the expectation is gratitude, what's the studio bringing to the table, besides the bill? Fans clocked the math. Headlines about executive compensation ballooning. Headlines about layoffs in the thousands. Headlines about consolidation, restructuring. And right next to those headlines, another round of costume fittings, another international junket, another month of NDAs. It felt less like partnership and more like a quota. This is where the Guardians became dangerous. Not because they shouted, because they refused to pretend. Press junkets turned bittersweet. "We love the characters," they said, eyes wet, smiles thin, read between the lines. "We love each other. We're not sure we love this." The studio wanted celebration. What they got was eulogy. Bautista kept pressing. He wasn't coy about it. "If Gunn's out, I'm out." That wasn't leverage. That was closure. And for a moment the House of Mouse stared at a scenario it could not brand manage. Guardians without the guy who understood why a blue man, with daddy issues and a raccoon with trust issues, could break your heart. Eventually, after months of backlash, Gunn was reinstated. Crisis dodged. Right, not exactly. You can rehire a director. You can't unring a bell. Because the bigger crack wasn't about one firing. It was about priorities. Guardians was proof that audiences still fall in love with characters, not content calendars. But instead of nurturing that lesson, the machine hit turbo. Spin-offs, crossovers, tie-ins, 5 shows and 3 films in a 12-month blender. The soul gets thin when you stretch it that far. And everyone felt it. The cast, the crews, the fans who started to ask, why does this look rushed? Answer: because it. Meanwhile, lower down the ladder, the numbers turned insulting. Former Disney talents started sharing what exposure pays when the exposure is all you get. 10-hour days and take home that wouldn't cover a month's rent near the studio lot. Influencers cashing a brand deal in an afternoon that dwarfed a week of set work. The optics were radioactive. Billion-dollar IP. Bargain bin gratitude. So when Bautista said he didn't know if he wanted to keep working for Disney, it landed like a body slam, not a tantrum. A thesis. If they'll do this to the director who made the franchise sing, what will they do to the people you don't see on Fallon? The grip at 3 a.m. in a rain rig. The VFX artist rendering fur until her wrists go numb. The assistant cutting sizzle reels on a borrowed laptop. Make no mistake, The cast didn't suddenly catch a case of principle in a vacuum. They watched the brand drift overextended, overmarketed, underloved. Even Bob Iger admitted it out loud. We taxed our people. Translation, we pushed too hard and called it strategy. The audience noticed, the critics noticed, the shareholders noticed, and the guardians, the literal faces of the miracle, noticed most. This isn't about one paycheck or one quote. It's about the tectonic shift from artistry to inventory. It's about the moment the family photo became a spreadsheet. And it's why a single weary sentence from a single weary guardian has the studio scrambling. Because it tells every other actor with a conscience that you don't have to play along. You want the studio still thinks this is fixable with a fresher trailer and a bigger budget line for fireworks, but the damage isn't on screen. It's in the trust account. The balance is low. The overdraft alarms are screaming, and the people who made you care about a talking tree are deciding whether to plant anything here again. Behind the curtain, the emails were worse than the interviews. You could feel it in the way publicists hovered, in the way answers got shorter and smiles got heavier. The studio line stayed chirpy. Great partnerships, exciting future, so proud, but the subtext was a slow bleed. There were layoffs with innocent names like restructuring. There were memos about efficiencies that translated to fewer hands doing more shots on less sleep. There were budget meetings where art was called content and release dates called obligations. Somewhere in there, a family became a spreadsheet. And yet, the brand kept asking for miracles. More crossovers, more spin-offs, more tie-ins to series that tied into other series you hadn't finished. Whole teams reoriented around synergy charts, while the people who actually made the magic were running out of hours in the day. You don't need a whistleblower to understand what happens when you take a boutique kitchen and force it to serve a stadium. The food gets bland and the cooks burn out. Meanwhile, upstairs, the optics were fuel on a grease fire. Exacom packages ballooned while crews compared notes on day rates that barely covered rent near the lot. The company insisted the market was hard, the economy uncertain, the future hazy. True, but it's hard to hear belt-tightening from a balcony seat. Out on the floor, VFX artists swapped horror stories about crunch that never ended because the schedule never did. Editors were told to find it in post for the 5th time in a week. Marketing blasted another glossy key art, while the costume team patched a hero suit between setups. When the folks in front of the camera start echoing the fatigue of the people behind it, you've got more than a PR problem, you've got a culture problem. That's why the gun saga lingers like smoke. Yes, he came back. The apology tour ended, Guardians 3 got made and it sang. But the trust withdrawal never got redeposited. You can't fire the heartbeat of a franchise on a Friday, announce business as usual on Monday, and expect everyone to forget the weekend. The cast didn't, fans didn't either. They rallied not because of a logo, but because of a voice. A weird, specific, stubborn voice that made a tree's 3 words feel like Shakespeare. You don't automate that. The quiet revolt didn't look like picket signs. It looked like honesty. Karen posted a wrap photo, thanking the family. No corporate tags. Pratt spoke carefully, choosing gratitude for the journey over hype for the expanded universe. Palm talked about what the work meant, not what the brand planned. And Bautista, never one for euphemism, said the part you're not supposed to say. If it's not with the guy who built this thing, I don't want it. That's not leverage, that's boundary. The studio's response was the same script you've heard 100 times. We're listening, we're evolving. The audience is our compass, but the audience started to drift. Completion rates dipped. Word of mouth sounded less like must-see, and more like maybe later. The sweet spot between spectacle and soul, the place Guardians lived, got crowded out by deadlines, and when the suits finally admitted they'd taxed their people, it landed like a confession whispered after the damage was done. Here's the kicker. The Guardians should have been the case study for how to do it right. Obscure IP, uncompromised tone, character before calculus, risk that paid off because it felt personal. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when a miracle is treated like a template. You can't clone alchemy, you can only respect it, or ruin it. And the money? Let's talk about the money. Not the box office totals you've memorized, the paychecks, the performers who put on mouse-eared smiles while their quotes got squeezed, the below-the-line army that turned sci-fi nonsense into tears and laughs and Saturday night plans, only to be told the curve is bending downward, so everyone needs to share the sacrifice. Funny how sacrifice rarely climbs the org chart. This is where the revolt stops being a headline and becomes a reckoning. If a global star risks legal blowback to say kill my character if you kill the culture, imagine what the rest of the ecosystem is swallowing to stay quiet. Agents are recalculating risk. Directors are reading the fine print twice. Younger actors are side-eyeing 7-picture deals because the math doesn't work if the soul goes missing halfway through. And then there's the rumor fog. Spin-offs paused, slates shuffled, strategic reviews that sound like prelude to a yard sale. Maybe the company splits, maybe it sells pieces, maybe it doubles down and prays nostalgia covers the gaps. Whatever the outcome, the lesson from the Milano's crew is brutally simple. The brand isn't the bond. People, and once people decide they're done carrying a machine that won't carry them back, there isn't a trailer cut slick enough to glue the pieces. So no, this isn't a tantrum, it's a verdict. The Guardians did their job. They took a joke premise and made you care so hard you cried over a cassette tape. They earned trust the hard way, scene by scene, joke by joke, wound by wound. If the studio can't meet that with respect, fair pay, sane schedules, creative honesty, then the galaxy-saving team walks, and if they walk, audiences follow. You can rebuild sets, you can rehire crew, you can recast roles. What you can't easily recover is faith. That's what's breaking here in slow motion. That's what the on-mic sigh gave away. Part 3, when you want it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Studios hate, audiences can smell indifference. You can hide it behind fireworks and needle drops for a while. But eventually the heart rate monitor flatlines. That's what the Guardian saga exposed. Not just a salary fight or a director drama, but a slow leak of care. The people who made you fall for a trigger-happy raccoon and a monosyllabic tree were treated like interchangeable parts in a never-ending content conveyor belt. And when they finally said, no more, the machine coughed. Loudly. Look where everyone landed. The writer-director who turned B-movie weird into A-list myth-making now runs the rival shop across town. The wrestler-turned-actor who bled emotion through prosthetics is picking projects that value performance over merch. The ensemble is scattering into films that don't require a 10-episode homework binge to matter. That isn't betrayal. That's self-preservation. And it's a warning label for every giant boardroom trying to spreadsheet its way to magic. You can't bully lightning into a bottle after you've kicked the sky. Fans saw it in micro moments. Press lines where gratitude sounded like goodbye. Social clips where jokes hit a eulogy. Interviews that stopped promising forever and started cherishing the finite. It's not that the cast turned on the audience. They turned toward themselves. They chose craft over sameness, time over churn, a human pace over a quarterly calendar. And the brain, it kept begging for one more, without fixing the reasons the last one hurt. Meanwhile, the rumor mill howled. Breakups, spin-offs, sales, splits. Choose your acronym and there's a thread for it. Maybe the company carves itself into sleeker pieces. Maybe a tech giant buys the crown jewel. Maybe it white-knuckles the wheel and calls retreat, refocus. Any of those moves can change a stock price. None of them, by themselves, restore trust. Trust comes back when a grip gets to see their kid on a weeknight. When a VFX team has a calendar instead of a countdown. When an actor's back end doesn't vanish into adjustments. When the people whose names scroll after the credits feel like more than legal requirements. There's a path out. It looks suspiciously like the path in. Fewer projects with sharper points. Green lights that start with why should this exist? Not what does this set up? Budgets that match ambition. Schedules that match biology. Pay that reflects reality. If a trilogy builds a golden house, the bricklayers shouldn't be sleeping in the yard. Put the adult pants back on in development. And maybe marketing can stop pretending every release is a cultural revolution. They're not. But some can be, if you leave them the oxygen. And it requires one more thing, nobody likes to say out loud, letting endings end. The Guardians worked because they were allowed to finish a sentence. Not every hit needs a multiverse of homework. Not every farewell needs a footnote, promising a return. Closure is not cowardice. It's respect for characters, for creators, for audiences who showed up on Thursday nights and cried into popcorn they didn't Instagram. Will the studio hear any of this? The optimistic version says yes, because the alternatives are already on the ledger. Slumping attendance, brittle morale, top-tier talent, eyeing the exit. The cynical version says nothing changes until a few more tentpoles collapse hard enough to rattle the glass on the executive floor. Either way, the Guardians left a blueprint as clear as a mixtape track list. Start from feeling, protect the weird, pay the people, tell a whole story, stop treating art like a faucet. You can open wider and assume water is endless. And for the rest of us, we vote the only way that counts in this business. Time and tickets. Follow the storytellers who respect you. Reward work that respects itself. When the credits roll and the house lights rise, ask the simple question that built this entire ride. Did it feel like someone cared? If the answer is yes, you'll tell a friend. If the answer is no, no algorithm on Earth can save it. Maybe that's the final twist the brand didn't see coming. The galaxy doesn't revolve around a logo. It orbits gravity of vision, of leadership, of people who keep showing up because they're seen, paid, and given room to make something worthy of your Friday night. The Guardians proved what happens when that gravity is real. Strangers in a prison block become family, and a summer flick becomes a memory you keep. They also proved what happens when the gravity fails. The ship doesn't explode, it drifts, quiet at first, then obvious. So if you're listening in the tower, hear the message that started as a murmur and ended as a megaphone. The heroes you banked on didn't burn the bridge. They built it, crossed it, and waited for you on the other side. You asked for another run while the planks cracked beneath their feet. They chose to stop. That isn't rebellion. That's stewardship of their craft, their health, their audience. The mixtape clicks. Side B ends. No post-credit promise. Just a lesson. Humming in the dark. Care is the only currency that doesn't devalue. Spend it, or watch the galaxy move on.